Yeah, I don't know.
It only takes, she said 48 hours usually,
Oh,
but I would never wait that long.
right,
So-
right.
Yeah, so
You'll
you'd
need
have
to
to
check on that this week, I think.
give us
I
the
think
evil
we'll-
eye at the end.
You have an idea how much?
How much?
No,
Yeah,
it's my own fault.
Yeah.
A couple years.
You think I would run it by now?
now?
You think I know, because we do it for Wednesday nights,
Yeah.
we do it for this,
And
and,
I was only
but
gonna get 50.
I forget
together
for both,
for
so.
free, Because we're hardly there.
although it doesn't really matter, because all they're gonna get is the back of Craig's head, so.
Right now, he'll have to edit out. Well, yeah, we figured out.
I think
when
it's-
things
I'm
out
thinking,
there.
I
Yeah,
don't
like the light of the fires, you gotta bend
Because when
it.
that's
know.
The women look the same thing.
Well, remember that year, I mean, they had all the
It's all wood too?
I'm not
This is
doing
something
it.
metal.
We're
This
going
is-
to-
Oh, really?
No.
No, we didn't. Okay.
I
couldn't remember.
You mean, did you
Deal
put
with
your
it.
windows out there now?
Yeah, you'll have
Because
to.
that'll still give us 3 weeks.
Are you
I
going
told
to-
you I haven't been in the basement. I will.
Well, thanks for the information.
It's that on my list, my
It's
to-do
still-
list. You didn't text me your lunch.
I got
Yeah.
2 more to do. One,
You
what
text
else we
me
have?
for lunch and I'll bring
I
it.
don't know what.
Every week we,
We're going to Wisconsin tomorrow,
When's
not
the
on
clock?
Thursday. We have to make
Yeah.
Twin Cities to do our
That probably works.
Yeah.
The battery operated.
every week we get here, it just seems like it's getting more and more real, and we're now down to about 4 weeks left before we leave, and so it's really kind of getting exciting, and, you know, the details are starting to fall into place. Before we kind of dive back into the study, we've got a little bit more information. There was a wonderful observation that was picked up. We've had these brochures, flyers for close to a year, and somehow nobody picked up on a misprint until last week. 2 weeks ago, when Amy picked up on it, and Barb has been chasing this down. And so Barb, what have you discovered about the fact that if you look on the itinerary, there's actually 2 Sundays, March 19th and March 19th, March 20th.
Yeah.
So what do we find out about that? What's the
Oh, yeah.
answer to the fact that there's 2 Sunday marches?
Well, I called her about it, and she goes, well, Sunday's a Sunday. And I said, yeah, but your dates are different. I said, so that makes the 23rd actually a Thursday, not a Wednesday. And so she goes, oh. And I said, so are we flying home on a Wednesday on the 22nd, or are we flying home on Thursday the 23rd? And she goes, what's the brochure say? And I said, Thursday the 23rd. And she goes, what's the itinerary for flights? And I said, Thursday the 23rd. She goes, well, it looks like we're adding a day. So she said she'd get back to me, and they're gonna add a day to Jordan.
Oh, cool.
So she has to get that all figured out, because that's the hotel they have to add to, that's,
At their cost.
Oh, don't
Was
Yes,
that the day when we did a whole bunch of stuff in one day?
yeah, no, that's in Israel. So, but, yeah, so, she was working all that out, hasn't gotten back to me since that email and stuff, but nothing was mentioned about additional money, and I'm sure it's not gonna probably be, because it's
Otherwise,
our
we would end up
mistake.
sitting in the airport for a day.
And that's what I told her we did not wanna do, sit in the airport, because they said it says we're coming back on that 22nd, flying out, and I said our flight won't leave until the 23rd, and she goes, oh, she goes, okay, let me talk to the big boys, and so she's working it out, and she said that, she did get back to me and said it looks like we're gonna add a day in Jordan, so,
So it's
Everybody's going to Jordan?
Yep.
3
all
people.
but the
Three
3
are.
from Ohio are not going to Jordan, so
We're
yeah.
flying home at the.
So instead of 3 days in Jordan, we get 4.
Would you be flying back on the 24th then?
Nope, we're
23rd.
23rd, it's still the 23rd, it's still, that's what our flight itinerary, the
The
itinerary.
departure and they leave and they come back on the same. They just had they had an extra day in there.
What happened is that when they wrote it, if you look, it's like the add-on for the Jordan, when they added it on, they did this Sunday, and then they did the
Yeah.
Sunday up there, but what they did is they
Changed it
incremented
to
one
Monday.
day. So
Yeah.
they have it as Sunday, March 20th, and then, so they have the days of the week wrong. And the problem with that is that regardless, our flights, we have to fly on the day that
Right,
we have
we
flights.
have the flight.
I just didn't wanna sit at the airport all day.
Right, and I said too, I said, well, even if we go back to Israel early, I said, you know, are we free to walk around it, you know, where we're
Yeah, I
at?
could've
Are
done
we,
that too,
you know, and just have a day of rest before we travel, or what? And she goes, well, you're not coming back until the 22nd. And I said, okay, so in Jordan, are we having a day of rest or what? And she goes, let me get back to you. And then she came back and said, looks like we're adding the day in Jordan, and then, that's, so.
We don't know what it'll be, but thank you for
Right, yeah.
first discovering that, and then,
Yeah.
because if we hadn't until we got there, it would have been much harder for them to
Right,
say,
to
okay,
say-
tomorrow we have to figure out what we're gonna do with you.
Yeah, and
It
we're
would have
gonna
been
stay.
sitting around to the hotels or
And-
something.
yeah.
So-
Or even on the street, because we
Yeah.
wouldn't have had a hotel.
Yeah.
There's no
So-
bus, there's no tour guides, and
Right.
you're just like, we'll pick you up here tomorrow morning and take you to the airport or something, but
Right.
thank you for figuring that out,
Yeah,
and then chasing it down and getting them to work that part. So basically, it looks like we're getting an extra day in Jordan, which, you know, we'll take. So who knows what that will be. You know, I'm gonna get drunk. I mean, I'm gonna,
He's German, he can do that.
Stay up all night so you can sleep on
Yeah.
the plane.
Any other little details before we kind of get into the topic? Yes,
Another idea,
yeah,
I talked to,
Kelvin.
Ron Kelderman,
Yeah.
and he has agreed to pick us up from the airport. So he will be on the 23rd.
So all we need is one driver to drive us down. We're gonna drive ourselves, the van, but the other van?
The other van going down,
Yeah.
Dale Wilson said he
Oh,
would.
okay, so we got our drivers
Yeah,
all line.
so we
Oh,
have
perfect.
Our drivers.
So,
Now, are we,
We're taking the Peelmobile, and when we get close to Chicago, we'll alert our grandson and they'll come get the airport and
get the
get the
van?
van.
And
I
the
think they're
van,
like
that
15.
van will stay,
We'll stay at his place.
okay. So things are falling together there. So we'll have a 15, or whatever Peelmobile is, and then
It's 15.
a 12-passenger
Yeah.
rented from Deary's.
so that's
So
good.
we're only gonna need one van rented both ways.
The other thing, I did this because I'm gonna be riding Ride this year, because it's something I've always wanted to do, and we're gonna do it, so James and Lexi and I are gonna do it. And they're expecting the largest Ragbri ever. On one day, they're talking about maybe 100,000 riders between Ames and Des Moines. The world record for the biggest bike ride is 48,000, but they're expecting 100,000. And I'm thinking, if we get off our bikes and go eat lunch or something, to find your bike again is gonna be almost impossible. So I ordered the Apple AirTags. If you have an Apple phone, and I thought, if I'm gonna order those, I'm gonna get those now. So I didn't tell them, I just ordered those last night. But those are great for your luggage. And maybe you guys have already had those users. I've never used those before, but I got thinking, those are just a little tag you stick in your luggage, and you can find it, you can track it on your phone within like 2 feet. So, you know, if you put in your thing, you put it on your phone. If you have an Apple phone, I don't know if it works on the other different
And you
kinds
can
of
buy
phones.
AirTags for Androids on Amazon.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can.
But in terms of just, I thought, you know, let's just stick it in our luggage and stuff, so, you know, if it gets lost or even in the airport, or, you know, you wanna know where stuff is. So, just another thought, it's, they're not cheap, I mean, it's like 25 bucks a piece.
$180 per.
Well, here's one I
So-
get 4 of them
I'm
for
teasing.
$77.
Yeah, so it's about 80 bucks for 4 of them, and I thought, you know, for each of our bikes, it's just nice if you're out there to be able to stick one and I can know where you're at. I can, you know, the kids in the car who are followers can see where we're at, we can put one in the van.
You guys need to, and we need to.
Yeah.
So-
You can look, and if your bike is moving and you're sitting in a restaurant.
That's an issue.
Go ahead, you want me to
But
write you a check?
also,
I
just
think
with
you
all
can.
those people, we've got a support vehicle, there's gonna be hundreds and thousands of vehicles, so how do we know where it's parked? So we just put the tag in the vehicle, and I can just follow right up to the vehicle. So I thought for our luggage, that's a good way to track it too. So if you wanna get some sort of tracking device, just little ideas to kind of make our trip
Do you guys have Androids?
easier.
Do you guys have Androids?
I have, he has Android, I have iPhone.
Do you want me
I
to
love that.
Why would you lose it? So we tell Pastor,
Hey, good hunting.
you're ordering quantity, or what?
I
Or
ordered
you say-
4 just for our family,
Oh,
but
you will.
we'll probably just use our 4 here, but if, we're just gonna have, we'll just use 2, one for you and one for me, so we'll have a couple we wanted to share. So we could probably work it out.
You can put them on your husband.
I put it in his
They
coat.
also said, which I have never done, I said,
Or maybe we don't.
you should also put a luggage tag inside your suitcase beside on the outside.
Yeah,
And all the traveling I've done, I've never done that. So,
The reason for that is that gorilla that throws it around in the back room that you
Rips
see
them
on
off the
TV.
outside.
yeah.
If it smashes open, they can
Hey,
figure
one
out.
other thing, you got, has everybody traveled internationally before? You
Yeah.
guys?
Yeah.
So you guys all have the transformer for your stuff?
Yeah,
oh,
the-
trick.
Not
electrical.
an adapter, but a transformer.
Oh, and
For your
converter.
electrical
Yeah,
stuff.
the converter.
Converter,
Yeah, the
converts
different
it from
plugs.
220
Yeah.
down to
Well, there's-
220.
She's got like 8 different ones.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, there's
Plus,
different
it's different. It's
adapters,
not
but
adapter,
this,
this is
this is a converter.
A converter is different than an
Yeah.
adapter.
Yes, the
Yes.
converter is a different.
Takes
In my way,
AC and
yeah.
turns it into DC.
No,
Uh,
it takes
with
220 and turns it down to
110.
110. Because I blew up my hairdryer and my flat iron in South Korea.
Well, that's an adapter, that's not a converter.
Right, that's
Right.
what she's saying, she blew hers
Yeah, I
up
used an adapter, I
because
didn't have
using the
converter.
adapter,
Yeah.
she didn't have
Yeah.
the
So you need a
converter.
converter.
But I also went on Amazon and bought a travel,
Hmm?
flat iron travel hair.
Yes,
Yeah, but
we
you need
do
probably a
that
different one.
automatically.
They're all
So,
220.
we might wanna, maybe Barb and I need to get together and just kinda go through a kind of checklist of things that we probably should do before the next
Yeah.
couple weeks. All right, well, just kind of keep these ideas coming, because these are the things this group think is kind of the more ideas we have for this. I've never traveled to this part of the world, I've done more of Europe, and those are easier to, adapt things, but,
No, they, how was it, this adapter, they said is in the universal kits that you get.
Okay.
It's, but the converters are,
Well, that thing that you plug your cell phone into, that's a converter. It's taking AC out of the wall and turning it into DC for the, whatever volts your battery in your phone is.
The one I ordered is a Septix Israel Jordan voltage converter. Converts from 220 voltage to 110 voltage for devices, like curling irons, hair dryers, shavers.
You're gonna do your
I-
hair, look it up under swallow.
I gotta make sure I take my curling iron, my straightener.
my straightener,
Okay, well, we're gonna move on while we continue our beauty tips. We're looking at, I finally figured out how this is organized, because I've just been following the PDF and the book that you have. By the way, I lost my book, I'm not sure where it went to, but PDF, I think it's geographically, it kind of goes from the north and it's working its way down. So today we're looking at Nazareth, and we're gonna get down to Jerusalem if we have enough time. So one of the places we're gonna stop is Nazareth, obviously we wanna stop there. It's the largest city in northern Israel. I didn't realize that Nazareth is considered the capital of Arab Israel. So it's a very Arab community. Currently, it's got a population of about 78,000 people, a little bit bigger than when Jesus was there. Just by statistics, about 70% are Arab, about 30% are Christian. Now that being said, what population is missing? Jewish. There aren't many Jewish people that live in Nazareth anymore. When we look at the religion, there's like 1% is Jewish, but mostly it's Christian and Arab. Yeah.
I told you wrong, we did talk just a little bit about Nazareth last time, because I had your statistics.
Okay. I thought we did. So we'll just.
Yeah, just,
Yeah.
I think maybe it was after this one.
Okay. So we did some Nazareth. Just so we're going in here. It can be referred to. The names could be either branch or to keep watch or guard over.
I have a question.
Yeah.
When you said, missing is Jewish,
Yeah.
in one of these shows that I had seen on, about Israel, it said that the Jewish people are coming back.
Yeah.
So why had they all left? Is it because of the Palestinian and all that?
There's a number of reasons. Number one is they never came back after the nation was formed. So remember, the nation of Israel didn't get formed until 1948. The Jewish population was dispersed after 70 AD, and they've just lived all over the world until it was reformed in 1948, after World War II.
Because they're Jewish Americans
Yep,
that are
and-
now
And so for
Heading
60
back
years, the nation was, Israel was formed, but they've always been in conflict, and we're gonna talk about that when we get to Jerusalem a little bit. So Jews have lived all the world, and many Jews went back and forth, but a lot of the world Judaism stayed in their, whether they were in Germany, whether in Russia, in the United States, different parts of the world, they just never moved back to the nation of Israel. They're starting to come back now.
Right, that's what this.
So that's kind of the part of it.
You said too, is that
Yeah.
they're starting to come back, and one person was asked why, and he goes, it's my homeland.
Yeah.
And so.
There's a connection to the land. They were also starting to see what I've heard, and again, I'll let you guys kind of talk to me, is a general rise in anti-Semitism around the world. And so the more other nations are becoming anti-Jewish, people who've lived in different parts of the world saying, well, why would I put up with this? You know, I've lived here all my life. You're turned anti-Jewish. I'm going to go back to a place where I feel at home. So that's a part of it too. So it's kind of that dual combination. That's my guess, not being geopolitical.
That map that you asked me about, the gray area, the one that's under your pen, I think it's disputed territory. It shows it up there as the West Bank.
Yeah, we'll get to that when we get to Jerusalem a little bit more, and to the areas there.
Have you seen the movie Exodus? You should order it.
Oh, Exodus, not Exorcist.
Exorcist.
No, not The Exorcist.
Not The Exorcist.
The movie Exodus. I think it was Kirk Douglas was the star.
Yeah,
But it's in color. It's an older movie. But it shows you how Israel was formed. The current Israel.
So moving on, since we did let Nazareth last time, at least for those who are here, we're going to get on to Cana. Now, Cana isn't really very popular, at least as a city. There are multiple places that are named Cana, or we don't know exactly where it is in the Bible. So there isn't a specific place we can know that this is the town of Cana. One location is about 11 miles southwest of the Sea of Galilee. So if you've got your maps, you can kind of find the Sea of Galilee. So southwest of that, that would be one location. There are at least 3 different locations that people have kind of claimed that this was biblical Cana. So we're not really sure exactly one. There's one that's 4 miles north of Nazareth. It's called Kirkhinnen. Another one that's Kerbet Cana, which is 9 miles north of Nazareth. So we're not really sure exactly which one is the biblical Cana. So we're going to go to one of them, and we're going to say this is as close as we can guess, because it just didn't develop.
It shows it way west of the Sea of Galilee on this one map that you printed today.
Yeah, and that's probably one of the guesses, but archaeologically no one knows exactly. There's probably a best guess, but right now these are 3 options of where it may have been. We know that Josephus mentions at least 3 different, now remember who I said Josephus was. Josephus was a Jewish historian that was a contemporary of Jesus, who wrote much of the history of the time. He was not a Christian or a believer, but his history of that time period is considered one of the foundational extra-biblical historical events. So when Josephus writes, we can probably say that this is probably accurate because he would have no reason to support a biblical truth because he didn't believe in the Messiah. But he writes and mentions at least 3 different communities named Cana. So we're just not really sure which one it was.
Is that in the land of Canaan?
It was in the Canaanites, but I don't know which city it was or the community of Cana.
So that would kind of be in that whole northern part of
Now,
Galilee.
in one of these Canas, now I'm not sure which one it is, probably the one we're going to stop at, there is a Franciscan church, and that's where this picture is from, and this is from out of our book, so I'm assuming this is the place where we'll stop. That's built over a archaeological site that they said underneath this church was a archaeological digs that they suppose was a worship site that dates back from the 1st century AD. So this is probably, at least has the potential to be one of the places where the wedding feast that would have taken place in this Cana. So if we get to this building and it looks familiar, that's where we're at. So
Here it shows.
the biblical reference to Cana, there aren't very many of them. Obviously we know what happened there. That was the wedding at Cana. This was the first public miracle that Jesus performed there, the water into wine. Jesus heals the official's son, who was from Cana there. And then Nathaniel was from Cana. If you remember Nathaniel from Cana. So those are the events at Cana. So we'll stop there and we'll see that biblical. I'm hoping that we'll be able to buy a bottle of wine and share it. Probably watered down, but who knows? Just kidding.
We had writer's tears, wasn't that the bottle of wine that we drank in Ireland?
Oh, it could have been, yeah.
Why, I mean,
Yeah, I'm all
we
for
could do that
it.
again.
I'm hoping it'd be good stuff because, you know, they said the wedding, they gave the bad stuff and then the good stuff after. So it should be good wine. So one of the places we'll see is Cana. No, just, we're kind of moving down from that northern area, from the Jezreel Valley, the Judean Rift. We're going to come down into the Judean Highland, and this is that middle part of the country that where the most populous areas are. So we're kind of coming down into this section here. You probably can see it better on the maps that you have. So this is where we're going to be at.
Gray area, yeah.
The gray area. On your maps. I didn't realize you're going to have much better maps, or I wouldn't have put mine up here, but.
Your
this-
map is fine, it still shows the gray area.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's sort of pinkish brown.
Yeah. But that's okay, this is, we're all learning this together.
Jerusalem's in that notch.
Yep.
Close to
The
it.
cities that we see in this Judean highlands, Shiloh, Jerusalem, Bethlehem, Hebron. You would have to travel out of the valley of Jezreel. Remember, we talked about the valley of Jezreel last week, which was the lowlands, that a lot of it was even below sea level. So you have to come up out of that valley into the higher levels of population to get into Jerusalem, which gives some meaning to the fact that we often hear when the travelers were going to Jerusalem, what kind of language would they talk about their journey? They would often say, we're going up to Jerusalem. You see that all through the Bible. It wasn't that they were going north to Jerusalem, they were physically going up in elevation to Jerusalem. And so I think when we come out of this, we're going to like, oh yeah, now I get it. They were going up, I mean, it's like going up into the mountains. You know, if you live in Colorado and Denver, you say, I'm going to go up into the mountains. So that's kind of that sense. So you kind of come up into the mountains. A steep ascent to get out of the valley up into this Judean highlands. And you can just kind of see from the topographical layout here. So we're coming out of this valley here up into these higher lands there. So that's the populated city. Ooh. Now, why did
Bob's
you-
maps.
Bob's maps,
one
yeah.
of Bob's maps.
Well, that's kind of
But
not a map as much as it is a picture of the,
Right.
But you get a sense, you get a sense of the top topography there.
Yeah.
This is farther north than what you're talking
I think
Oh,
that's
I know.
It is, but you do have some of the
Well,
sense of
donkey.
the highlands, yeah.
Yeah, nothing's flat
So,
there.
yeah.
Nothing.
Which is very interesting because from a defensive standpoint, these cities built up in the mountains would be much more defensible, much more protected from other invaders if you're kind of higher up than the valley, which is easier to travel through. So it kind of gives us that sense.
So is the camera on?
Yep, it should be. I started it. So one of the first places we're going to stop, or at least one of the places we're going to stop as we kind of come down into this Jewett, we go up into the Judean highlands, is the community of Shiloh. I hope I'm saying that right. It's 20 miles north of Jerusalem. It was considered part of the land that was given to Ephraim, the 12 sons of Jacob, that allotment. Because it was on the hilltop, because it was up in this highland, it was a military base. And so this is a well-defined fortress, and they set up their defenses there. This is where they would protect their nation from. Before Jesus' time, this was the capital of the nation of Israel. So before Jerusalem was established as the capital, from 369 years before Jerusalem, this is right about the end of Malachi, the Old Testament. The Old Testament ends about 400 years before the birth of Jesus. Those intertestamental period, would have been the capital of Jerusalem. The location of the original tabernacle, so when Joshua conquered the Promised Land. They came across the Jordan River. They brought with them the Ark of the Covenant, but they also had the tent, the tabernacle. Once they had done their conquests, they kind of set up a permanent home until they moved to Jerusalem. And it would have been here on Shiloh where the tabernacle would have rested until they moved it down to Jerusalem and the temple was built. So this is that tabernacle and all those events that were there. One of the things I found interesting was that on high Jewish festivals, because it's up high on a high hillside and it's open, that there was estimated anywhere between 1.5 and 2 million Jews would come and surround the hilltop and surround this area to celebrate the festivals. This was a major event. Now, there couldn't have been a lot of Jews living in the land at this time. You're talking a couple hundred years before the time of Jesus. To get a couple million Jews that would come to this area to worship the high festivals, that was a pretty big deal. If you ever go to an Iowa football game and just see 70,000 people, that seems like a lot. You multiply that times 30. That's a lot of people come in to celebrate. But just an interesting place that we'll maybe get a sense of when we get there and see the reality. Some of the biblical references to Shiloh and the events that took place there. Obviously, it was the land given to Ephraim. This is where Joshua encamped after he had made the conquest into the Promised Land, and he set up the tabernacle, the tent of meeting where God would meet the people. By the way, what was significant about the tabernacle, aside from being the tent of meeting, this is where the theophany, that the presence of God was made known. When God led the people off Mount Sinai, how did the people know where God was leading them? What was the way they could tell?
Pillar of smoke by day and a fire by night.
Exactly, and then by day, when God would come, he would show his presence by the pillar of cloud in the tabernacle. So they would know when God was present in the tent of meeting if the cloud was hovering above it. And so this wasn't just some tent where we all kind of meeting place. This was where God literally dwelled, and you could see his presence by the cloud hovering over it. So the image of God physically manifesting himself in a cloud was a powerful reality. And you can imagine that these hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people gathered around this mountain or this hillside, looking up to this tent and seeing the cloud of God that was just hovering there, knowing that we are literally in the presence of God. Kind of takes you back to the image of Mount Sinai, where God was there and he spoke from the mountain. And so they had that sense of God's presence. So that would all have been taking place just north of Jerusalem here. In 1 Samuel, we have the story of Samuel's miraculous birth and his dedication. His mother was beyond birthing years, and so he was born that way, home of the ark. It stayed there until the ark was captured by the Philistines and carried off for, I don't remember, it was like about 38 years it was captured and it was lost. So the Ark of the Covenant until they recaptured it and then moved it down to Jerusalem. So interesting stuff. All of this took place during those intertestamental period.
Is it still in Jerusalem?
No,
This
we don't
is
know where it's
Shiloh.
at. It's been lost.
Oh,
The Ark of the
Ark
Covenant
of the
has
Covenant.
been lost. It's with the destruction of the temple in 70 AD, the Ark was lost. I tend to think that it's in a chateau in France. Why not? If you're going to be somewhere, why not be there?
So what is it? So it's the box?
It's the holy box that God had with the cherubim, seraphim, where the 10 tablets of the 10 commandments were told to be stored, where a jar of manna that was used for the feeding of the ford during the 40 years, and where the staff of Moses was kept. So this was the sacred, and if you've ever saw the Raiders of the Lost Ark, it has the power to kill all the Nazis. Sorry.
Anybody else that was there?
Yeah. But yeah, that was the sacred reality of God's presence. So yeah, that ark was, if you touched it, you die. Where the ark went, when they crossed the Jordan River, remember when Joshua led the people to the Jordan River, it was the ark that went through first and the water stopped so that it could go through on dry ground. This was God's sacred presence. And it was taken into captivity. We don't know where it is now. Which I tend to think is God's plan. Why is it we don't have the Ark of the Covenant in this box. We don't have the Noah's Ark. We don't have the cross that Jesus died on. Why do you suppose a lot of these truly biblical elements no longer exist?
Because they're things.
Because they're things, and why is that important?
It's not important to your salvation, your faith.
What if they did exist? Would
Scientists would
they could dispute them? They could
dispute it
probably
and
try to discredit them. That would be
discredit
certainly one
them,
thing.
like a book I read once.
Yeah. I tend to think that if we had those, we would turn them into idols.
No.
We would worship them, we would charge money to go see them, we
I'm
would
sure of
pray
that.
to them, we would say if you touch it, you're gonna get a miracle. If we still had those things, we would turn them into some sort of talisman. And I think God is saying, I'm gonna keep you from that temptation to do that. So, that's my theory. But I think that God is protecting us from ourselves, because we do stupid stuff like that, right?
That'd be kinda like the Pope is to the Catholics, right?
Exactly. Well, what was the issue that Martin Luther had during the time of the Reformation? All of the relics. I mean, you've heard the term relics, right, during the Reformation? Every little fiefdom had their collection of relics. We've got the fingernails of Saint Michael. And you come here and you can see we've got a vial of breast milk from the Virgin Mary. You think I'm kidding that people would collect stuff like that? Or we've got a feather from the Holy Spirit dove that landed on, and they would collect this stuff, and then they would gather money, and people would come and pay money to see that. That was the relics of the Reformation. And hundreds and hundreds. Frederick of Saxony, Martin Luther's benefactor, the guy kind of who gave all this stuff, was known for having the greatest collection of relics of anyone in Germany. He collected all these kinds of things, and one of the things that he had to do as an old man is say, you know what, he thought he was doing really good until Luther said this is a bunch of BS, and he had to get rid of all that stuff. So I tend to think that we would do exactly the same stuff if we had some of these things. So that's my opinion. Yeah.
Just backing up to, isn't it the same symbol when we talk about the pillar of smoke when they elect a pope? That's how
How they let people in black of the gray smoke, yeah.
Yeah, so it's the same
Letting-
continuity of,
Letting people know.
yeah.
I'm not sure exactly, because I think that's usually they used to burn the voting.
Yeah, they still do.
Yeah, they still do it.
Yeah.
And, who knows, in the next couple of years, we may see that happen again, but
But that's how.
I'm waiting till it's red smoke when they vote their first Lutheran pope. That'll burn down the whole place. But yeah, that's that same symbolism of that smoke coming out,
The
yeah.
smoke coming out,
Yeah.
they've elected a new pope,
Yep.
white smoke.
That's an interesting, I hadn't really kind of thought of that connection.
That touching the ark and dying, there was some people, Levites or something, that were allowed to touch it.
Only
Because
the
they moved
certain Levites who were allowed to touch it, and specifically the high priest. But if you were carrying it, and who was the individual who was carrying it, and he tripped and fell, and he reached out and touched it, and he died?
Yeah.
I mean, God took this pretty serious stuff, because this is God's holy place.
Because they had like
Holes,
wooden
yeah.
sticks through it or
They
something,
would take
so that
poles,
they
they
could
would
carry
pull
it
through.
without touching it.
Yep.
So I gotta wonder how the people who eventually stole it, how they managed to do that, unless they had spies watching and saw that
Or-
you could grab the poles.
Or maybe it lost the ark represented the presence of God.
Yeah.
What changed?
He wasn't there anymore.
Where was he?
I don't know.
In the person of Jesus.
Oh, okay. So
So the ark,
the ark disappeared after Christ?
yeah, in 70 AD when the
Yeah,
temple.
that's right.
So I tend to think that the ark no longer represented the presence of Christ because he came to us in flesh. And so then I don't care if you touch it, it's just a box and piece of wood now, because God has truly come amongst us. That would be my explanation, but I'm just kind of throwing out ideas. So let's go on to, we got a lot to do in Jerusalem. There's a lot of stuff to see and do here. We're not going to get through all of it. But just Jerusalem, when you say Jerusalem, it has had a number of names over the time in the history. Jerusalem, Salem is, I think, the first place it's known by. One of my favorite Old Testament as well as New Testament characters. How many people remember the guy named Melchizedek?
Yeah.
Heard of Melchizedek? He was the king of where? Salem. And we're not talking about Massachusetts, you know, the witch trials.
He was very favored by God.
Yeah, but maybe more than that. Also called Jerubs or Jubes, Zion or the city of David. This is all under the title of Jerusalem. So different things, Jerusalem. Now, I'm doing my effort to be Bob. I had to go out and I had to find a lot of different maps, but this is just, this isn't Jerusalem, this is the old city. It's kind of like the inner downtown of Jerusalem. Jerusalem today is just under 1 million people. This is kind of the historical, biblical Jerusalem. So, you know, when we get there, it's a metropolis. It's a big city, it's a modern city, but this is kind of the old city. When you see Jerusalem, I have no idea where we'll be staying, but if you just look, and you might be able to see, this is the tabernacle area. So this section here, we got the Temple Mount, so all of this is the tabernacle. This is where the temple would have been. It's no longer there, but this is where it would have been. One of the things that you will hear a lot about, and you'll see, and you'll even listen today if you listen to the news, you'll hear about the different quarters in Jerusalem. There are 4 quarters that make up the old city of Jerusalem. You've got the Muslim quarter, the Christian quarter, the Armenian quarter, and the Jewish quarter. These are historic ethnic quarters. I don't know if there's specific boundaries, but they're pretty clearly defined sections. These are kind of where people go. Now you go back and forth, but you know what part of towns to go in. You know where you fit and where you belong. The town gate, now the city wall, we will see, and the city wall that used to go around the city of Jerusalem was built 300 years before Jesus was born. There was originally, I think, 14 or 16 gates. There's only 7 that are still operational or functional. So we're going to get to see a lot of this, but this is where we're going to spend a lot of time. This is where the main biblical events took place in Jerusalem, in this area. So kind of keep that in mind, the city.
Can you send that map to us?
I think I can. I'll try to find out.
Is Bethlehem University on there?
Probably not. I don't know where it would be. Yeah.
You can do a print screen and then
Yep.
just send it via email.
Here's the Via Dolorosa, the way of suffering. This has been the road that Jesus would have walked carrying the cross out to Golgotha. So this is the path that he would have taken. Now, I'm not sure exactly where Herod's guardhouse would have been, but it's called the Via Dolorosa, walking out. So we're going to get to see a lot of these places, and we're going to spend a lot of time in here. And I think here's the Wailing Wall, the Western Wailing Wall. This is what remains left in this just little section here of the original Temple Mount. I shouldn't say the original. This is the second temple. So the original temple built by Solomon was destroyed, and this was the rebuilt temple when they came back out of exile. This is Nehemiah and Ezra that built the temple. So this is the second. So we'll get a chance to see this Wailing Wall, you know, and we've seen pictures of that. So that's kind of where that is. So just a sense of where things are, and it'll become more clear. But just kind of get a sense of the old city of Jerusalem. Yeah, and I'll see if I can get a print of this for you.
I sent out not near as good as that one, this yellow, like a topple. Everybody should have that. It
Yeah, you
shows
can get it
the
right
same
on the
thing.
phone too.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there you go.
So just kind of talk about Jerusalem a little bit in general. This is just general information about Jerusalem, as much as contemporary before we kind of get into the biblical. So we know about the city itself. It's 16 miles from the northern end of the Dead Sea. So when you kind of see it on your map there, you kind of see where the Dead Sea. 38 miles from the Med. It's 350 feet above the Rift Valley. However, it's only 2,600 feet above sea level. So your Rift Valley is 1,100 feet below sea level. So when we're in that Rift Valley, we are below sea level. Jerusalem is only 3,500 feet, but you're only 2,600 feet above sea level. So we're kind of dealing with a lot of different topography that we don't deal with here in Iowa, do we? Interesting thing. Jerusalem as a city is mentioned more than 500 times in the Bible. We're not going to go through all of them. We'll try to get to half. It is the center for 3 major world monotheistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. So we consider those our major centers. Now this one I didn't know, but I thought was really interesting. As a city, it has been destroyed at least twice, probably more than that, has been besieged, and by besieged they mean for between 6 months and a year. So not just kind of, okay, we surrounded, but at least between 6 months and a year, 23 different times in its history. Recaptured after being lost 44 times. Attacked by foreign armies 52 times. Now I don't know where they got these numbers, but I got them off the internet, so they must be true. The oldest part of the city has shown settlements from 4000 BC. Now, 4000 BC, just kind of rough numbers, where does that put us biblically? That's really close to the flood. So the settlements, now it may not have been Jerusalem, but there have been possibly people living there really close to the time of the flood or shortly thereafter. So this is an old city. The current city walls were built in 1538 by Suleiman the Magnificent of the Ottoman Empire. Now, what does it tell? When we say Ottoman Empire, what do we know about that? It was Muslim. This would have been during the time of the Crusades, because the Muslims had taken over Jerusalem, they had captured Jerusalem, and the English and the French armies, this is where the Crusades came from, wanted to recapture the Christian city, and this is where the Crusades came in, because they came to recapture Jerusalem. So Suleiman the Magnificent wanted to protect his Muslim city and built the walls around it. So the walls around the city of Jerusalem were built by the Muslim to defend it from the Christians during the Crusades. Now, 1538, I think that would have put us about the second or third crusade, but my history isn't that accurate, yeah.
Question, the four quadrants that
Four
you showed
quarters,
us,
yeah.
you got the Muslims, you got the Jews, and you got the Christians, that's three of them. Armenians, what's their religious
Armenians are,
affiliation?
generally they're Christian,
Okay.
but they don't separate themselves by their religion as much as their nationality. So it's the Arabs, it's the Jews, it's the Christians, and it's the Armenians nationally, not so much by religion. Yep. So yeah, it's interesting that the city walls that we will see when we get up there, that we'll pass through several gates from, were built by Muslims to keep the Christians out. So interesting. Which, you know, we hear about the Crusades. This is kind of where it all happened. Divided into the four quarters. Current population is just under 1 million. Obviously, most of them are going to live outside the outer places, but we're going to spend most of our time in the old city. 60% Jews, 38 Palestinian. Palestinian by the majority are Muslim. Now, religiously, this is kind of interesting. 59.9% Jew, 37% Muslim, 1.7% Christian, and 1.1% undeclared. There aren't a lot of others or unknowns or don't know. You're something when you're living in Jerusalem. You know, there aren't a lot of others. You know, in the United States, I think right now the population of those who would put other under the religious self-declaration is going from like 22% to 28% of Americans that no longer identify with any religion. So this is a very highly religious place, but and that's also why there's hostility there. The status of Jerusalem is at the core struggle between the Israelis and the Palestinians. You know, we've heard all of our lives this battle between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And the number one thing, aside from the Palestinian state, is what do you do with Jerusalem as the city? You know, maybe you've heard of this idea of the two-state solution. You have a Palestinian country and you have a Jewish country. And I think everyone, you know, I shouldn't say, I think most people could settle for the fact that we'd have a two-state solution. We'll have a Palestinian, but the problem is, where does Jerusalem, who gets Jerusalem? And Jerusalem fits right in the middle of it, and no one wants to give up Jerusalem. And so that becomes kind of that battleground over this struggle between the Palestinians and the Israelis. And we still see it even today, this fight going on of Jerusalem. So that's kind of the idea.
If you give the Palestinians 100 square yards of land anywhere, they'll mount rockets on it and shoot them at Jerusalem.
Well, that seems to be their way of responding. Just a little bit of history. 1948, the Arab-Israeli War. West Jerusalem was won by Israel as part of the city. East Jerusalem and the Old City, that part that we just saw, was captured by Jordan, which was the Muslim or the Arab. So the city itself, it kind of makes us think of what was, during World War II, we had the same issue in Germany, remember? East and West Berlin.
Yeah.
You know, and we literally divided the city in half, built the wall, the whole Berlin airlift, that whole thing. We did the same thing in Berlin that they did in Jerusalem. The only problem is that they didn't build a wall. We're still trying to figure out how to solve that solution. When we were in, what was that, the town in Ireland, in Northern Ireland? Belfast. You had that same sort of thing. You had the Irish and the Protestant and the Catholics. They were fighting and literally throwing rocks over it, and it's still going on today, this territorial battle. Well, that's still happening today. So this was the division. West Jerusalem was Jewish, East Jerusalem was Jordan or Israeli. During the 6-Day War in 1967, Jordan wanted to say we're gonna conquer, we're gonna drive out the Israelis, we're gonna wipe them off the face of the map, we're gonna get rid of all of them, and they attacked Israel. And in fact, there were 6 different nations that attacked Israel. And it's called the 6 Days War because that's how long it lasted. Israel was able to defeat all 6 of these nations in 6 days. And in the result of defeating them, they won back all of Jerusalem. They took the entire city. They seized control of all of it and its surrounding territories. Since then, they have kind of slowly given back a portion of Jerusalem, and they've tried to find, and they keep giving back parts of the city, trying to find a balance to which they can find some peace. So far, that hasn't worked, but that's a part of the political nature of what's going on today. And we have this reality. And then I just put this last piece of information there because as a nation, United States, our U.S. Embassy has been in Tel Aviv since 1948. That's where we put our national headquarters. However, in 1948, when we put our headquarters in Tel Aviv, we said as a nation that it belongs in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Every president since 1948 said, I'm going to move the capital to Jerusalem where it belongs because that's the capital, that's where every, the UN, or that's where our consulate should be. It wasn't until, 2018 when President Trump actually moved it there that we actually did, and it was a huge uproar and everyone got mad and this is going to cause the end of the world and all kinds of problems. But as a nation, we said it should be there, but we didn't do it. And so I don't want to get into politics, it's not the whole point. But the political ramifications and the tension is just still there.
America always supported that, they just never did it.
Yeah, we put our capital in Tel Aviv as a temporary consulate and always said it should be in Jerusalem, we're going to move it there, but we just never did.
When did, I think it was after 67, when did the Jews take the Golan Heights? That was after...
72? Was it 72 or 73?
That sounds...
Correct me on my history, because now you're going way out of my lane, so...
I'm pretty sure they'll never give that back. Because it overlooks the city and it's just a perfect place to set up artillery.
And so the Golan Heights is another, again, these are political battles, and it's not a part of what our trip is, but it's also part of us understanding where we're going. And it's an interesting part of the world. Just kind of taking this back historically, why do the Muslims feel that they have a claim to this area? One of the things, if I'll maybe back this up, I don't know if I can do this. Right here, the Dome of the Rock, which we would call the Temple Mount. This is where the temple of God was, where the temple curtain tore, where Jesus went and taught and the sacrifices were made. Right in the middle of this is the Dome of the Rock, which is a Muslim mosque. We'll talk about this in a little bit, but the Dome of the Rock is an Islamic holy place. Because on the Dome of the Rock, that's where Abraham offered the sacrifice of his son Ishmael. Did that sound wrong?
Yep.
Because who did we say Abraham offered the sacrifice of his son? Isaac.
Same thing.
No, not the same thing. Because remember, Abraham had two sons. His oldest son was from the handmaiden. Because remember, Sarah couldn't have children, and she gave.
That's the Muslim connection.
Right. Abraham couldn't have it, but his first son was from the handmaiden, and his son was named Ishmael. The next one that came along was Isaac. The Arabs say that this is where Abraham offered his son as a gift to God, Ishmael, the oldest son, on this place. This is our holy place, as God took the sacrifice and accepted the sacrifice, or stopped the sacrifice of Ishmael. This is not something that's going to be solved today. We say, no, this is where Abraham offered Isaac. Now, we don't know if it's the exact place, but to them, this goes back a long time. They say, this is our land.
Is there anything in our Bible
Not in our Bible.
about Ishmael being offered as a sacrifice?
No, but you'd
at
have to
some
go to,
other
and I don't even know, I've never read the Quran, but I suppose there's something in there. By the way, they also say this is where God's first created, this is where creation began. So the Dome of the Rock is the point of creation, and it's where Abraham offered Ishmael as a gift to tribute to God. So the important thing here is that this conflict is thousands of years old, going back to Abraham and Isaac. Remember, Abraham, the father of we call him the father of who? Abraham and Sarah are the father of the Jews. If you're Islamic, you'd say Abraham and Sarah are the father of the Arabs, or the Muslims, because they trace their lineage to his firstborn son, Ishmael. We trace our lineage to his trueborn son, Isaac. This is how far back that goes. So, again, I'm not getting political, but this isn't just kind of, oh yeah, the 6 Days War in 67 or the 48. This is deep, deep stuff.
There was a 7 Days War too that was
What's
before
that?
the 6 Day War.
Was there? Yeah.
Sorry,
I missed that one. It sounds like
split the rock.
they split the rock. Yeah. So yeah, what was Hagar? Was her name? Was it?
That was
Yeah.
his mistress.
That was the handmaid.
Handmaid,
Yeah.
She was there.
She was Arab, and so yeah, this is how far back this goes, and this is why those animosities run deep, because we claim Abraham as the father of Jews, Jesus a Jew. Our heritage is Jewish. That's our history. That's their history. So who gets to claim Abraham? And by the way, they will be the first one to say that there are 3 great Abrahamic religions: the Muslims, the Jews, and the Christians. They're all Abrahamic religions because we trace our heritage to Abraham. So just kind of interesting, when we talk about kind of the general understanding of what's going on in Jerusalem and where it comes from, these hostilities and these hatreds and these conflicts are nothing new, and we can have all kinds of peace treaties, but they're not going to go away.
And I will point out that one thing Jennifer said to me this week, with the unrest that's there right now, she says, we have trips going daily to all these places, and they're not being disturbed, they're not even seeing anything, they're not worried at all. She says they would be the first to let us know if something was going wrong.
Yeah,
Because
that's good.
Israel as a state would say that, or even the United States would say, yeah. So she says, nope, they're not worried about it at all.
And thank you for that. That's good. I didn't want to turn this into something that scares us, but I do think it's important for us to kind of understand the background of what's going on here. It's not just us versus them. This is deep-seated theology, doctrine, religion. This is our identity. Who gets Abraham? And just from a purely logical standpoint, who's Abraham's first son? Well, there's an argument for Ishmael.
Yep.
Now, we would say, but it's not by his wife, it's by his handmaid, but it's his DNA. So how do you solve that?
Wasn't it God's plan that Abraham and Sarah
Abraham and Sarah,
Were
but
common.
Abraham, now,
Right, right, but I'm saying
yeah, we would say that,
Ishmael,
right?
yes.
But if I'm an
God's
Arab
plan.
though, I'm gonna say, but this is his son.
Mhm.
And if God had wanted him not to have a son, then he would not have had a son with Hagar. So who are you to deny the son that God gave him with Hagar? And so I could make that argument.
In defense of Abraham, whose idea was it that he sleep with his handmaid?
Yeah, it's
Yeah, but
women, they're always
Yeah,
causing.
that's
But who
right.
So-
actually did it?
Yeah.
So, as with Eve,
With all this being said, what we really want to be able to do, and I guess what I would like us to be able to say is when we get there, and if there is hostilities, if we see, even if we hear about it or watch the news, the hostilities, no, we don't have to appreciate maybe the way it's being expressed today, but the sense of ownership or the sense of outrage, maybe we can understand it without trying to say that they're just inherently wrong, because they got an argument. I don't agree with them, but they have an argument, and it's something we have to figure out.
they share the same God.
They do, and they just don't know it.
Yeah, because,
Yeah.
well,
They just don't share Jesus.
no, they don't share Jesus, but the God of Abraham is the God of the
Yeah, Right.
Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims.
right.
They just don't recognize
The
any
three
of
great
half of that.
Abrahamic religions.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good for us to kind of be aware that they're not just bad people.
And that's part of what Jennifer said, she said that this has been going on so long that the people there, she goes, I hate to say they're numb to it, but they're numb to it.
Yeah.
Because there's been so much unrest their whole lives there, that's just like Kelsey said in Jamaica, to leave the beach in front of their hotel, they had to give to these guys carrying machine guns, they had to give their name, their hotel room, the time they left, the time they expected to be back and everything, just to walk down in front of another hotel. And she said, it was freaky at first, but she said they were only there to protect us from what was going on
Where is this at?
in Jamaica.
Oh.
And you know, on a beach. But it's,
All right, well, we'll just kind of pause there. We'll get into some of the Jerusalem sites in the next couple weeks. We're just going to go as far as we can, but just we're kind of getting into the core stuff now. We're going to get into some of the specific, looking at the places we're going to go to and the events we're going to see. But it gives us a background. We're kind of getting to the things that we're familiar with. And so we're going, so any other thoughts or observations? So, all right, well, thank you so much. Let's close with a word of prayer then. Once more, Lord, we give you thanks and praise for this amazing gifted opportunity that we have to be able to come and walk in the same place that you did. While it's changed over the millennia, Lord, open our hearts to experience the reality that you are a real God, that this is a real place, and it's not just a story in a book or a part of history, but it is an exact reality of our history, our faith, our life. Continue to be with us as we prepare for this trip. Give us courage and faith and confidence to grow in our understanding of you as you touch our lives through this experience. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you very much.